Jonathan Scott presents from a slide. USU, America's Medical School. An aerial photo of a building among trees. www.usuhs.edu. A QR code.
What's unique about the university is all of the medical students while here on campus are commissioned officers in either the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Public Health Service, and we have our first Coast Guardsman this year as well, which essentially means that the students earn a salary while they are in school, and they also leave and graduate medical school completely debt-free. So I've included the QR code if anybody's interested in learning more about the university.
Objectives.
Our objectives today are really fourfold, as you can see on the screen. I will cover the first two objectives, talking about the prevalence of dietary supplement use in the Department of Defense, abbreviated DoD from here on out. And then I'll talk about some of the research initiatives that we specifically have going on here at the university. Andrea will then cover down on the next two, which will be a brief discussion about issues associated with dietary supplements, and to spend the majority of our time covering Operation Supplement Safety, which was mentioned earlier today by Dr. Dwyer.
Sources of surveillance data.
So before we look at the prevalence of dietary supplement use, it's important to understand really where these data come from. And as listed on the screen here are the three main sources of those information. The first being the Survey of Health-Related Behaviors, which is led by the Defense Health Agency, and most recently revised and fielded by the RAND Corporation in 2018. The second is the Millennium Cohort Study, which is led by researchers out in San Diego at the Naval Health Research Center. This is a longitudinal study that's been going on now for over 20 years, really designed to explore the impacts of the most recent conflicts in Iraq as well as Afghanistan. And then last is the U.S. military dietary supplement use study. This was a large cross-sectional study that was conducted between December 2018 and August 2019. In all of these studies, dietary supplements are generally grouped into categories based on their ingredients. And the main categories include multivitamin, multiminerals, individual vitamins and minerals, proteins and amino acids, herbal supplements, purported pro-hormones, joint products, as well as combination or other products. Further, a user has generally been defined as an individual that self-reports using at least one or more of these categories on at least a weekly basis.
Dietary supplement used by service branch. A bar graph shows percent usage by the Air Force, Army, Marine Corps, and Navy, all between 60 and 80%.
Notice here we have the Air Force, the Army, Marine Corps, and Navy. The newest service being the Space Force was not included, as they were not a service at this point in time, but in future iterations, we'll be able to capture some of those data from the Space Force as well. But really what you see here is across the board, regardless of service, approximately 3/4 or nearly 75% of all respondents of the nearly 27,000 individuals that responded were categorized as a user. Again, someone using at least one category one or more times per week over the past 6 months in the case of this study. Those prevalence data are considerably higher than what we generally see from NHANES data, which we heard about earlier. Is typically around half of US adults report using one dietary supplement in the past 30 days. Similar to the general population, multivitamin, multiminerals were most commonly reported amongst this group. But after the top categories where we begin to see this deviation. With military service members, the second most common category was a protein or amino acid supplements, really followed by combination products. So these were products that really covered multiple categories. And you can see that's generally different than the main population, than the general US population. And Andrea will discuss some of these particular products in greater detail in her slides to come. So given that nearly 3 in 4 service members self-report using dietary supplements, I'm going to talk a little bit about some different research initiatives we have going on here at the Uniformed Services University.
Dietary supplement research initiatives. A photo of translucent yellow pills.
So the first project we have is an ongoing project focused on product testing. Specifically, we're interested in testing products for adulteration, quality, and purity. This project is really a collaboration between USU and the University of Mississippi, also known as Ole Miss. We recently completed a project to explore dietary supplements marketed for brain health as well as cognitive enhancement. These projects were supported by folks from the Office of Dietary Supplements. And I want to talk a little bit more about each one of those in a little bit more detail in the slides to come. And then we'll wrap up on talking about projects that are really targeting on improving the omega-3 status of service members.
Brain health qualitative results.
So over the last 2 to 3 years, there was really a notable increase in the number of questions that we received from service members asking specifically about products marketed for brain health, and really took this opportunity to dive into that space, to understand what some of the common ingredients were, to look into the already existing peer-reviewed literature to understand both safety and efficacy, and then pulling from the Ask the Expert feature on Operation Supplement Safety, purchased, in this case, 22 of these products and had them sent to Ole Miss for testing. And these are really the results that are being presented here. And as you can see, of those products tested, almost 75% of them had at least one ingredient claimed on the label that was not detected, and a further 9 out of 22 products had ingredients that were not consistent with the definition of a dietary supplement. So what this means is, looking at the label itself, there was at least one ingredient in there which would have required a new dietary ingredient notification, or an NDIN, of which there was not one currently available. So I think it really speaks to, in this particular product category, some challenges that folks may face in this space. This project yielded 4 peer-reviewed publications, including a systematic review and recent expert panel recommendation, in addition to several educational items, which we will look at here in the coming slides.
Immune health qualitative results.
Next project was a big interest in immune health products, as you can imagine, over the last 3 years, and emerging from a global pandemic, there was no shortage of questions that would come in on products marketed to either enhance or to boost immune system function. So a similar approach was really used in this space as well, as far as looking up particular ingredients, evaluating safety and efficacy, but also understanding popular trends as far as products being sold, but really then ultimately pulling from the questions that we receive from service members to target specific products that are sold here in the United States that we could go out and purchase and then have tested down at Ole Miss. And perhaps of greatest concern was that over 40% of the products tested had at least one ingredient claimed on the label that wasn't detected. So, and I think this kind of speaks to this piece of consumers may not be fully aware of or what they're purchasing, or what they're purchasing they may not actually be buying.
Immune health publication. An article titled, Analysis of Select Dietary Supplement Products Marked to Support or Boost the Immune System. The
results from this publication were very visible, as you can see, most recently from JAMA Open Network article in August. The particular piece already has in excess of 28,000 views. This is an older screenshot, so it's making its way around.
Improving omega-3 levels.
The last project has to do with improving omega-3 levels in service members. So data suggests that, similar to the general U.S. population, service members also have low levels of omega-3s, as measured by the omega-3 index. Most of the data out there in the general population has to do with cardiovascular health, but there's some emerging evidence of the role that omega-3s may play in not only physical health and improving muscle recovery and reducing delayed onset muscle soreness, but also in mental health or cognitive function as well. So in the examples listed up here are just 3 places where we're looking to improve specifically that omega-3 index level, whether it's by providing dietary supplements and using an omega-3 index calculator to help personalize a dosage for an individual, looking at improving the menu where individuals eat, whether that's using omega-3 enriched foods such as eggs and various food products that are available, and or making fatty fish such as salmon just more readily available for individuals to consume, or really a combination thereof. These initial studies were conducted with the 3 service academies, the United States Military Academy at West Point with the Army, the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, and last at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. We're working on the finite data analysis now and hope to have a publication out here in the coming months in this space.
Issues associated with dietary supplement use.
So I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Andrea Lindsey, the Director of Operations Supplement Safety, to begin our conversation about issues associated with dietary supplement use. Andrea?
Andrea Lindsey.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. And I echo his sentiments that we are very happy to be here today to talk with you all about the work we do in the DoD. And specifically, I'm going to cover down on some of the issues that we've uncovered in our work, and also give you an overview of the Operation Supplement Safety Program. It's not letting me advance, Jonathan.
Why is this important?
Okay. So first, I'll talk to you a little bit about, this misinformation that we know is ever present on the internet. And there's peer pressure to take what others are taking. Service members share information. They certainly talk in the gyms, et cetera, about products they are taking. We also track direct marketing to service members and by some dietary supplement manufacturers, as some offer discounts and free trials. We even have some recent information that some off-base dietary supplement retailers are coming on base and providing free samples. Due to the potential safety issues and quality of some high-risk dietary supplements, direct marketing to military is a concern, as these products could present a risk to the health and careers of our service members. FDA has found contaminants and adulterants, and we've listed some of those there on the screen. We have also tested, as Dr. Scott mentioned, products and found contaminants and adulterants. Also, FDA has said the high-risk categories are bodybuilding, weight loss, and sexual enhancement. We've also identified the brain health category as a new high-risk category of supplements. In addition, any supplement that has an ingredient on the Operation Supplement Safety list of DoD prohibited ingredients is considered high risk. We also know from our work and also documented that service members are at risk for adverse events, and that some products can be a threat, cause them to be a threat for military readiness. And so that is why we are here and our program exists. And I don't even like to mention the cost of taking a service member out of service, because of course the health event is serious enough, but the cost to then maybe take a service member out of service is also an issue as well. Next slide, please.
Positive urinalysis.
So I wanted to show this example of a positive urinalysis. This was a senior officer who contacted us back in 2018 because he tested positive on a drug test. He tested positive for D-amphetamine. He was trying to make weight, and so he purchased a supplement on the internet. Of course, we don't know what's in a product unless we have it tested in an approved lab, and so we sent it to Ole Miss for testing. Next slide, please.
What he was taking: a black bottle of stymamine black product on a web page.
This is the picture of the supplement he was taking, and one more click.
Supplement facts appear.
This is the supplement facts. Now, we could certainly have a discussion about what we see in that stymamine matrix blend. However, we know that we had to test the product to see what caused that positive drug test. And upon testing, it in fact contained L-lysine D-amphetamine. I recently went back to the analysis and read that DMHA was also in the product and not listed on the label. DMHA is a synthetic stimulant not allowed in dietary supplements. So what we have is another example of a case where a senior officer tested positive, was sidelined for quite a few months, and was able to save his career. And we don't even want to talk about potentially what could have happened to his health. Next slide, please.
Operation Supplement Safety, OPSS.
So now briefly, I'm going to give you an overview of the Operation Supplement Safety Program. We refer to it as OPS or OPSS. Next slide.
A photo of bottles of supplement powders and liquids.
OPS is the military's go-to program on anything related to dietary supplements. It was back in 2012 that the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs said we need a DoD-wide educational campaign on the safe use of dietary supplements. And that was really due to many adverse events and several deaths in the military associated with the use of two products in particular that contained DMAA, a synthetic stimulant similar to amphetamine. And many of you will recall that the manufacturers of those products were claiming DMAA was a natural ingredient from the geranium plant. In fact, we know that it is not. So here we are today, an established program. Next slide, please.
A logo for OPSS. The mission, informed use of dietary supplements.
I want to emphasize our mission. And as I mentioned, we know that there is a potential for adverse events from service members that take many dietary supplements that could be dangerous, which poses a threat to military readiness. While we acknowledge that it is challenging for us to measure any behavior change, we know that education brings awareness to this topic. So we want service members to be informed users, and this is the behavior we are trying to impact. Next slide.
A tablet shows the website. A QR code appears in the bottom left corner.
So on the tablet on the right, you could see the main page of the website. And I've actually chosen the tablet form because we know from our analytics that about 70% of our users are on the mobile device. So everything we do, we hope is consumable on the mobile device. We have many approaches to our education. Certainly the website at ops.org is a very big piece of that education. It's extremely important for us to get out from behind the desk and meet service members where they are. We do a mix of webinars and in-person presentations, and we show our work at professional conferences. It's very critical for us to have that interaction to keep our information relevant and focused. Next slide.
DODI 6130.06, use of dietary supplements in the DOD.
So this is showing on the left-hand side of the screen our Department of Defense instruction, or as we refer to it as the DODI, 6130.06, use of dietary supplements in the DOD. Due to the frequency of dietary supplement use by service members, an overall DoD policy was needed to provide guidance to ensure safe supplement use and minimize the risks to the force of potential life-threatening adverse events resulting from dietary supplement use. Also, trying to prevent those potential disciplinary action from taking supplements with ingredients on the prohibited list. So what does the DoDI essentially say? Well, we've listed that on the right side of the screen. It formalizes Operation Supplement Safety as the DoD program. So we went from that educational campaign back in 2012, 10 years later, we're an established mandated program. It requires education for all service members and anyone who touches a service member. So that's not only our clinical providers, that's anyone who's in the health-related services, health promotion, fitness leaders, strength and conditioning coaches, etc. For these individuals, we are creating a health professional module, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It also mandates adverse events reporting by healthcare providers. This is a topic that is not going to go away for us. In fact, we just answered a congressional request about what DoD is doing with regard to reporting adverse events associated with dietary supplement use. So we're going to be talking about that and coming up with the best mechanism across DoD, and you'll be hearing about that more down the road. It also establishes OPS as the host for the DoD prohibited dietary supplement ingredient list, and I'm going to show you that on the next slide.
DoD prohibited list. A QR code appears in the bottom right.
So there is the landing page of the prohibited list of ingredients. I can tell you, we have gone through several iterations of this. It's very challenging for the IT folks at the Uniformed Services University to come up with an algorithm that accounts for many of the difficult ingredients that have numbers, commas, and dashes, and some of our steroid-like ingredients. So this is where we are right now. And you can see on the right side of the screen that we have over 4,500 terms. And so that's about 790 primary substances and about 3,700 synonyms. We cannot post the entire list. And so service members or anyone working with service members has to type in every ingredient separately. And we acknowledge that is a daunting task. We are working on an app that I'll tell you about in a minute. Next slide, please. So we've typed in DMHA because we saw that on our product label. And on the next screen, you see that it clearly tells the user the ingredient is on the prohibited list. You also see those other names listed. That is, we know sometimes there are other names listed on the product label. And you also see a reference link and more info. When we have that information, we provide that. All of this will be provided in the app that we are working on. Next slide, please.
A yes/no scorecard for supplement screening. A QR code appears to the right.
So this is our scorecard or algorithm, and another educational tool we have in the toolbox of trying to educate the masses on the topic of dietary supplements, which is not an easy topic to educate on. So we developed this and tweaked this. This has been several years now. And we know that navigating ingredients is very challenging, especially with performance enhancing substances. And so there's many steps a provider and certainly a service member have to go through. So this is our safety rating tool. You can see that there's 7 questions and they're simple. We think they're relatively simple and they're yes or no. So an answer of yes scores a 1 and no scores a 0. So products scoring less than 4 are considered risky, and products with 4 or better are considered less risky. Now, with the signing of the DoD, the first thing a service member has to do is to determine whether or not their product has a prohibited ingredient. If it does, they should cease and desist. If it does not, this is a useful tool. Next slide.
The scorecard appears on a web page.
This is showing our interaction active version of this. It's under Check Your Supplement on the main page of Operation Supplement Safety. I know I've used this many times in a store, helping family and friends choose supplements. And so if you haven't tried it, I encourage you to do so. Next slide, please.
Educational materials. 2 newsletters.
This is just a snippet of our educational materials. We recently updated our messages for leadership. You're seeing on the left-hand side of the screen. And our Real Foods handout continues to be one of our more popular educational products on the website. Next slide, please.
Covers for a brain health and immune health guide.
Talked about at CHAMP, we have research initiatives where we evaluate the evidence for dietary supplement claims to understand the potential benefits potential harms, and whether the claims made are backed by science. These initiatives help us at OPS to respond to inquiries in providing the most up-to-date, evidence-based information and producing educational materials for our service members and providers. So you can see there the pictures of the Brain Health Guide and the more recent Immune Health Guide, and these are a compilation of the individual evidence-based articles. We have a few graphics, and we're able to then push out the information on social media as well. Next slide, please.
4 podcast advertisements. What should you know? What to ask your healthcare provider, looking at whole person health, and use in the military.
Well, I was very excited to participate in our podcast series. It was the first time we did it with this Immune Health Project, and you can see we were very fortunate to have Dr. Costello and Dr. Brown participate. I personally had a lot of fun. I'm not sure everyone at CHAMP would agree because we were on a very tight deadline, but the good news is we know we can do it. If you haven't listened to these, put on your headphones, take a walk, and listen in. There's some really great information, and those are available on our YouTube channel. Next slide, please.
Dietary supplement Ask the Expert. A QR code appears in the bottom right.
Well, I'm just showing the landing page of our Ask the Expert portal. That's available on every page of the Operation Supplement Safety website. Our Ask the Expert questions are a very large part of the work that we do. Since the DoD was signed, we are averaging over 120 questions a month. All of the answers are evidence-based, and we strive for 5 to 8 business days.
8 questions. A question from Anonymous. Is Pump X safe to use in the DoD?
On the next slide, I'm showing a sample question. This was from an active duty service member. Is Pump X safe to use in the DoD?
A tub of Pump X and the supplement facts.
And on the next slide, we show what we find on the marketing website. The team gets busy, and we point out that we can only provide information from the marketing website. Of course, this is not based on any testing in a lab. And so we've looked up this product. We, see the label, and on the next slide, we point out that, in fact, this product contains 3 ingredients on the DoD prohibited list. Those are 3 ingredients which should not be in dietary supplements. We also have evidence-based articles on those ingredients. So we have a little paragraph that we include in our answer on those ingredients, and also cover down on the other ingredients of concern. So you see there 300 milligrams of caffeine. And then to answer the question, is this product safe? Of course, we have no way of knowing what would happen to anyone with the combination of these ingredients in the body. Certainly a very big concern for our service members. Next slide.
Social media. Facebook, at Operation Supplement Safety. Instagram, at OPSS.org. Twitter, at OPSS.org. YouTube, at OPSS.org. A QR code.
So we're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And I know that we share Office of Dietary Supplement tweets and et cetera, and they are very good about also pushing out our information. Next slide.
What's next?
So what's next for us?
Health Professional Module. Raise your dietary supplement IQ.
I mentioned the Health Professional Module. So we're on sections 4 and 5 of the module. We've got 5 sections that we've scoped out, and 3 have been built. We anticipate completion and rolling this out probably not until the end of 2024. We will probably have it on the JKO platform. And so it can be of value to not only service members, but anyone, any providers that are in or outside of the military. And we also send out the sections as we complete them to have people review them, and we will also test it in the environment before we launch it. Next slide.
OPS ID ingredient database.
So our ops ingredient database, we started to create back in 2020 for our app. And we also realized that we needed a place to house all of our prohibited ingredients. You can see that we have over 1,500 ingredients now and over 8,600 synonyms. This is actually turned into quite a very large project in and of itself. Our vision is that ingredients will be color coded. We're going to have an expert panel to guide us through this. And hopefully down the road, it will be of use to others in the public and researchers. But certainly for us, it will be very important for our app. And also users will be able to get any warnings or information about potentially problematic ingredients. Next slide.
OPS SUPP app. A mobile phone screen displays the app.
So I couldn't be more excited about our app because I feel like we always get the comment, and especially from service members, why is it so difficult? And, you know, our vision is that the app will allow a user to quickly seek information about dietary supplements, ingredients, and some products, and if they've been identified for potential risk. So the idea is that the app does all the multi-step work for the end user, and then you see that barcode scanner, and you see that will point out if a product is third-party certified, if it has a prohibited ingredient. What is that ingredient? Are there some issues with it? Is it a WADA prohibited ingredient? So that project will also probably not be completed until the end of 2024. Perhaps next year at the Practicum, we will do a live demo of the app, and that would be really exciting. And so we have to beta test it as well. And you'll be hearing more about that in the next year.
For further information, please contact Andrea Lindsey, MS, Director, OPSS andrea.lindsey.ctr@usuhs.edu.
So with that, I really want to thank you again for the opportunity to just give you a little insight into the work we're doing within the DoD. And Dr. Scott and I are happy to take any questions or comments that you may have. Thank you.
Rebecca Costello.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Jonathan. We do have some questions in the chat, and there's one from a long-term follower of yours and of Champ, and it dovetails with another question. Also, want to know about what other partnerships you may have to increase your work and put out your message. We know that you work with the Office of Dietary Supplements closely. What about the other federal agencies? Are they assisting you? Are you working together in some fashion? I know you have a number of programs.
Andrea Lindsey.
Well, thank you for that question. You know, our work that we do with our federal partners is really critical. And we do work with all of them. And particularly, I would say, you know, Department of Justice, we work very closely with, and of course, FDA and FTC, and really everyone in DEA. You know, we frequently will write to DEA, for example, to say, can you help with an ingredient? We don't know what this ingredient is. Is this a scheduled ingredient? And they really, you know, provide us with assistance. We also, for the second time, will be doing our Let's Talk Dietary Supplement. And I think the vision there was really to do exactly that, is say, let's all have a discussion and share resources on this topic because we all come at it from a different standpoint. So our federal partnerships are very important. All of our military service-specific partnerships are very important. The Office of Drug Demand Reduction is one of our partners. That's the drug testing. And also we've partnered up with the United States Anti-Doping Agency in the past. And that just gives you a little bit of, hopefully, insight of that.
Rebecca Costello.
It's like you have the canary in the mine shaft. Oftentimes the service member provides that initial, surveillance or question, and you pass that information along when it's relevant to federal partners, right?
Andrea Lindsey.
Correct. I mean, we share that with all of them, and then, what they do is what they do. And I think that really speaks to the topic in general, that all of the federal partners have a unique stake in this topic area. And I think that we've worked together very effectively in sharing information, and it certainly has been a huge benefit to us.
Rebecca Costello.
Right. Maybe that begs a question for Dr. Scott, talking about partnerships. You mentioned a partnership with Ole Miss for some analytical work. With your ongoing study, say with the omega-3 study, do you have university partnerships with that? You mentioned the omega-3 index, and I was wondering how that was measured.
Jonathan Scott.
Yeah, so we've worked very closely with the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine, or USAREUM, located out of Natick, Massachusetts, for a lot of this work. The omega-3 index is being measured currently with using Omega Quant's products. So just using a couple drops of blood on a treated piece of, on a special piece of treated paper that then is sent off for analysis in this space. We certainly welcome the opportunity to engage and interact with other, university and academic partners in this space for sure, as it's an interest, as mentioned, not only for us, but seems to be a growing interest amongst many others.
Rebecca Costello.
Great. Wonderful. Andrea, is the OPS scorecard database available to the public?
The OPS scorecard.
Andrea Lindsey.
The OPS scorecard is also check your supplement on the main page of Operation Supplement Safety. And that is also available as a downloadable PDF. But the ingredient database that I mentioned is not available yet. I know we have a lot of acronyms, and sometimes it's challenging to follow it all. Hopefully that answered the question.
Rebecca Costello.
Yeah, and there's a question whether you interrelate with the Veterans Administration, and I would say yes, they're involved in the Dietary Supplement Nutrition Coordinating Committee.
Yes, they're part of our audience, absolutely.
Okay. I think here's a question. Is there any discussion about the positive effect of dietary supplements, which often have better outcomes with less adverse effects than pharmaceuticals used for the same health imbalance? So do supplements sometimes fare better in terms of adverse events or positive outcomes than traditional medicines? I think that depends on the population and what you're looking at, what type of outcomes. Yes.
I think go ahead, Jonathan.
Jonathan Scott.
Well, I was just going to say, at times it can appear that the messaging is doom and gloom, and that's certainly a messaging that we have really tried to pivot and move away from. And as Andrea mentioned, that really the mission of OPS being to highlight informed use. So in places where we know there is safety, when we know there is efficacy, that is really supported by the totality of the available evidence, there are on OPS, info sheets that are specifically tailored in that space to help folks be appropriate and strategic with their use. Say, for example, of caffeine or creatine is just two examples of individual ingredients. I will say much of the education that's happening in that space, it's really challenging to look at individual ingredients, right? Because as mentioned before, so many times they're part of a product that contains any number of different ingredients, and or thinking about the indications with which those products have been studied. A lot of times we don't have the full purview of somebody's medical history and background to be able to see with any degree of certainty whether or not something may be safe or effective in an individual use case, but are certainly working with our next generations of physicians and advanced nurse practitioners at the university, so they are aware of the resources that are available and also how to contact and make connections with us so we can continue this conversation as they move more into that direct patient care role.
Rebecca Costello.
Great, great. And that leads into another question of how much time do the medical students receive at USU in terms of nutrition/dietary supplement education, and what materials are available to them?
Jonathan Scott.
Yeah, that's a good question. So during their first year, they receive a block of instruction during their pre-clerkship time period on dietary supplements that is more of an overview of the regulatory landscape and begin to introduce some of the resources that are available to them. And then once they've gone out and completed some of their clinical work or clerkship time period, we see them during their third year during a module called Bench to Bedside and Beyond, in which case we really dive deeper into the topic and use some case scenarios and different products to further highlight their ability to integrate and leverage the resources that are available, and really begins to help them think about the discussion they'd like to have with their patients as it pertains to dietary supplements. Also thinking about and the new electronic health record that is beginning to be deployed across the Department of Defense, MHS Genesis, how those dietary supplements are being captured through a patient's through their patient's history, and then as Andrea mentioned as well, that reporting of adverse events. And then in their fourth year, there is an advanced clinical rotation specifically focused in the nutrition space, where we're able to really tailor that towards an individual's needs or questions that they have in that dietary supplement space.
Rebecca Costello.
Wonderful, wonderful. Sounds like you're a little bit ahead of the curve there with trying to promote nutrition education in the medical schools. Well, I thank you very much for your presentation today, and the participants will have your contact information, and now they know where Ask the Expert lives. And you might be flooded with questions, Andrea.
Andrea Lindsey.
Oh, well, we welcome any questions that come our way. So thank you.
Rebecca Costello.
Thank you again for your presentation, and I think we'll move on in this session. And I'd like to invite Dr. Brown, who is currently a program director at the Office of Dietary Supplements, where she's interested in research that explores the impact of supplement use on resilience and health in diverse populations. And she's really going to tell us what resilience is all about. As the chair of the Trans NIH Resilience Working Group, Dr. Brown's work focuses on elucidating biochemical mediators of resilience to help gain a better understanding of how physiologic adaptations to environmental and biological stressors may impact nutrient status and overall health status in individuals. Welcome, Dr. Brown.
Resilience as a complementary approach to understanding health. Mary Frances Picciano, Dietary Supplements Research Practicum, May 22, 2023, LaVerne L. Brown, Ph.D. Office of Dietary Supplements, National Institutes of Health.
Hello to the attendees of the Mary Frances Picciano Dietary Supplements Research Practicum. My name is LaVerne Brown, and I am the Director of the Resilience and Health Studies Program at the NIH Office of Dietary Supplements. I also chair the Trans NIH Resilience Research Working Group.
Balls labeled Risk Reduction and Prevention, Targeted Therapeuticals, and Resilience Capacity fall through a funnel labeled Health.
For this presentation, I will describe the process used to conceptualize, define, and harmonize resilience research across multiple NIH institutes, centers, offices, and also across multiple domains. And I will discuss best practices for the application of the resilience concept and the design of research studies. I hope that by the end of this presentation, you will realize the potential for resilience research studies to be considered an important complementary approach to investigating or understanding health outcomes.
Disclosure information. The author of this presentation has no financial interests or relationships to disclose. The views expressed are those of the author and do not reflect the official position of the National Institutes of Health. Mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations does not imply endorsement. Consider 2 patients being evaluated as candidates for total knee arthroplasty. Photos of an elderly man and woman.
So why resilience? Why should we at the NIH, or why should you as researchers interested in the potential benefits of dietary supplements for improving health outcomes, why should any of us have any interest in resilience research? I'd like to answer that question by way of consideration of 2 case studies of 2 individuals that were evaluated as candidates for total knee arthroplasty. Dr. Heather Whitson, director of the Duke Center for the Study of Aging and Human Development, presented these case studies last year at the Trans NIH Resilience Working Group seminar series. Now, from the case studies, one individual was described as a 76-year-old woman who was a caregiver for her husband. She'd had obesity, hypertension, depression, a sedentary lifestyle, and a history of coronary artery disease treated with a stent back in 2015. Now, on the other hand, there was a 75-year-old man with well-controlled hypertension and glaucoma. He played golf and tennis weekly and had a supportive wife and 2 daughters that lived nearby. And it turns out that both individuals went through with the knee replacement surgery. But following the surgery, the woman, despite having several known risk factors, bounced back from the surgery with full recovery, while the gentleman, despite having relatively fewer risk factors, suffered complication after complication and never fully recovered. So then, how do we predict which individuals can recover better following exposure to a stressor? Well, we believe that resilience frameworks can investigations of the mechanisms or factors that allow some individuals to show a full recovery or even growth following exposure to a stressor, while other individuals do not.
An illustration of a castle under attack.
Another way to think about this is to imagine a castle that appears to have some structural wear and tear. In fact, when observing this castle in a static state, you might describe the castle as damaged or even fragile. But through the lens of a resilience framework, we expect that the real strength of the castle cannot be fully understood until the castle comes under attack. Because when that castle comes under attack, there could be mechanisms that come into play that may allow for resilience that we wouldn't or couldn't know about when observing the castle in a static state. So again, at the NIH, our interest in the science of resilience is to develop frameworks that might help to elucidate those mechanisms, processes, or factors that protect or enhance a system's response when it is exposed to a challenge or stressor.
Resilience is trending. A man wears a shirt that says, "I am resilient." A necklace with the word, resilient. Books about resilience.
And that seems like a simple enough task, except the problem is that the term resilience has become a buzzword. We see the word on jewelry, we see it on clothing. There have been several books written on the topic. Some personal care products have the word resilience on their labels. And of course, we often see the word resilience on the labels of dietary supplement products.
A product label appears titled resilient.
Now, in 1993, a physician scientist by the name of Dr. Dante Cicchetti warned that this might happen. He stated that resilience was at risk for being viewed as a popularized trend that had not been verified through research. And therefore, resilience was in danger of losing credibility within the scientific community.
A call to operationalize the definition of resilience in 1993.
Now, to address his concern, Dr. Cicchetti suggests that first and foremost, researchers must clearly operationalize their definition of resilience. He also warned, though, that definitional diversity could result in vastly different conclusions drawn amongst similar profiles. And finally, Dr. Sajeti encouraged that as the science of resilience advances, specifics on the operationalization of the resilience should be characterized in all research reports. Now, these statements were taken from an introductory manuscript for a special issue publication on resilience in 1993. The objectives for writing this special issue in 1993 were remarkably similar to our objectives more than 25 years later for creating the Trans-NIH Resilience Research Working Group.
Defining a Trans-NIH Resilience Research Agenda.
Now, once the Trans-NIH Resilience Working Group was established in 2019, one of the first activities of the group was to host a forum to develop an NIH-wide operational definition of resilience. Participants at the forum included representatives from institutes, centers, and offices from all across the NIH. Those representatives engaged in presentations of examples of resilience from their own various institutes, centers, and offices, and they also participated in discussions through 2 breakout sessions that included a series of rather intense deliberations. But it was through those intense deliberations that the forum participants were able to come together and suggest criteria for consideration of an NIH-wide definition of resilience. So with the suggested criteria and an acknowledgement of key resilience concepts that had been previously utilized in the literature, an NIH definition of resilience was developed, and it states, resilience can be defined as a system's capacity to resist, recover, grow, or adapt in response to a challenge or stressor.
A graphic appears on the screen. From left to right, it's labeled Challenge, System, Response. Below graphics display possible responses to a stressor.
To fully capture the functional aspects of resilience, the Trans-NIH Resilience Research Working Group also developed a conceptual graphic. The graphic, shown here, represents that over time, a system's response to a challenge might show varied degrees of reaction that likely fluctuate in response to the type of challenge, the severity of the challenge, the length of time exposed to the challenge, and/or innate or intrinsic or even extrinsic factors. The graphic also shows that a system can be represented by various domains, factors, or processes that impact human health. For example, the system could represent an environment or a community, but also an individual's psychological, physiological, and molecular capacity. And finally, the graphic highlights a system's potential reaction or response to a stressor. For example, when a system is exposed to a challenge or stressor that results in no disruption to the system, then the system has responded by resisting the challenge. That is ultimately restored to baseline status, then the system response is characterized as recovery. Now, if the system is initially disturbed and then recovers, and the recovered state is an improvement compared with baseline, then the system showed growth or an adaptive response. Each of these reactions are relevant to resilience outcomes. On the other hand, a maladaptive response, which occurs when a system's reaction to a stressor results in a worsened condition compared with baseline, is characterized as diminished resilience. And then resilience is lost at the point of collapse and when there's no sign of recovery.
A strategy for harmonizing resilience research at NIH. A flowchart.
So soon after developing the conceptual graphic, the resilience team at the Office of Dietary Supplements developed the Resilience Research Design Tool to offer guidance on questions to consider when reporting on or designing resilience research studies. The tool provides a flowchart of 6 questions that we believe if these 6 questions are affirmed, that they might improve consistency on the characterization of key features in a resilience research study design. Now, we consider this to be a minimal first step towards harmonizing the science of resilience. So let's walk through the different layers of this resilience research design tool. The first question in the flowchart asks, are one or more key research terms identified in the title, abstract, or specific aims? Now, we consider research terms such as adapt, adaptogen, growth, homeostasis, modulators, mediators, protective, reconstructive, recovery, repair, of course, resilience, resist, and reverse. All of those are considered examples of resilience research terms that should be present in the title, abstract, or specific aims. But the real goal of this question is to acknowledge that inclusion of the word resilience in a study design does not automatically qualify a study as one that will advance the science of resilience. And on the other hand, exclusion of the word resilience in a study design does not automatically disqualify a study as one that will advance the science of resilience.
Photos of doctors treating patients.
The Resilience Research Design Tool also acknowledges, with question number 2, that research studies that are designed to explore resilience should not focus solely on disease, risk pathways, or adversity. We believe that this only gives half of the story. Instead, resilience study design should intentionally target outcomes related to health maintenance, ability to thrive, or preventative or protective pathways. In other words, we believe it's important that we understand and assess a system's weaknesses as well as its strengths. And resilience studies might uncover opportunities to strengthen and or at least maintain or protect those strengths. It alludes to the concept that resilience encompasses the capacity to resist, adapt, recover, or grow in response to a stressor or challenge. This means that research studies that are designed to explore resilience outcomes should appropriately characterize a stressor or challenge from which an outcome is measured. Examples of stressors and challenges that have been characterized in resilience research studies include, and of course this is not an exhaustive list, but it includes challenges like aging, work overload, natural disasters, and high amyloid plaque burden, and that's just to name a few. Now, in some cases, proxies for stressors have been used in resilience research studies when direct measures of a stressor are not feasible. For example, when exploring virus exposure as a stressor, antibody load has been used as a proxy to determine the likelihood of a previous exposure. The Resilience Research Design Tool continues with question number 4, which asks, is an intervention identified? Or are protective factors identified? Or are protective factors sought for discovery? Now, this question in the Resilience Research Design Tool encourages researchers to explore the possibilities that resilience outcomes can result from traits that are innate or intrinsic to a system, and can also result from other internal factors as well as external factors. We believe that full characterization of the factors and/or traits that influence resilience, and that includes interventions as well as protective factors, will improve the harmonization of resilience measures and metrics. And question number 5 of the Resilience Research Design Tool reminds researchers that measures and metrics in a resilience study design should be intentional about capturing changes that strengthen and or empower a system towards resistance, recovery, growth, or an adaptive response. Now, keep in mind that the system to which I'm referring can represent your whole body, your mind, your community, your environment. It can represent your immune system. It can even represent your digestive system. Whatever the system is, the goal of building resilience capacity is to strengthen and or empower that system towards better health outcomes.
A table shows examples of resilience research from 2018 to 2020.
Now, in a moment, I will walk through an example that illustrates the application of this as well as the other criteria in the design tool. But first, I'd like to point out that we use the Resilience Research Design tool to identify a few examples of resilience research studies that were co-funded at the Office of Dietary Supplements between 2018 through 2020. You can see from the titles of these studies that a range of systems and domains are represented. The titles show psychological, neurological, immune, and behavioral domains represented. Likewise, a range of stressors were well characterized in each of these studies. We see stressors like sleep deprivation and social defeat, infection, challenges such as aging, depression, psychological impairment, and even respiratory viral infections. And the resilience outcomes explored in these studies include resist, recovery, as well as adaptive responses. As for the actual measures of resilience, it appears that inflammatory signaling, changes in oxidative stress, and mitochondrial function were used most often as markers in these particular select studies. And for these examples, the interventions focused on botanicals and/or dietary ingredients. So now, let's consider the application of the Resilience Research Design tool with respect to an actual study. Here's an excerpt of a study that was co-funded by the Office of Dietary Supplements. I've modified the title and intervention slightly to protect the investigators and research integrity. Now, this study, which I've titled Mechanisms and Active Compounds in the Botanical Water Extract, or BWE, serves as a good example of a resilience research study that checks all boxes of the Resilience Research Design tool. Now recall, the first question of the Resilience Research Design tool asks, are one or more key research terms identified in the title, abstract, or specific aims? We see here that the key terms identified in this study include the words enhance and reverse. But note, the word resilience was not mentioned anywhere throughout this study. The second question of the Resilience Research Design tool asks, does this study target health maintenance, ability to thrive, or preventative or protective pathways? And we see that the investigators use both targeted and unbiased approaches to explore their intervention's protective effects against mechanisms of beta amyloid toxicity. The investigators go on to say that the mechanisms explored in these studies are relevant to age-related decline in neuronal health and cognition in general, and are not limited to those associated with beta amyloid toxicity. In other words, the investigators were careful to not focus the study solely on the disease pathway or the beta amyloid toxicity. Instead, the investigators were intentional about exploring the protective factors that allow for neuronal and cognitive health in general.
The questions are highlighted on the page.
The third question of the Resilience Research Design tool asks, does the research design include a stressor or a proxy for a stressor or challenge? And here we see that the stressor is the aged mouse model of Alzheimer's disease that has the high beta amyloid plaque burden. The intervention in this study is the botanical water extract. And then two key questions of the Resilience Research Design tool to capture changes that strengthen and empower the system towards resistance, recovery, growth, or an adaptive response. And then does the intervention act directly on the system? We see here that the investigators show that their intervention, the botanical water extract, was able to reverse learning deficits in the aged mouse model of Alzheimer's disease without altering the brain beta amyloid plaque levels. This suggests that the intervention could attenuate beta amyloid neurotoxicity without altering its formation or deposition. This means that the intervention did not act on the stressor, and instead acted on a system to strengthen the system such that learning deficits were reversed despite continued formation and deposition of the beta amyloid plaque. So that was a really good example of a study that met all criteria of the Resilience Research Design Tool. But let's take a look at another study.
The study appears.
This example represents a study that was not at all designed to explore resilience outcomes. But nonetheless, we can use the Resilience Research Design Tool to consider if or how a study might be modified such that it could explore resilience outcomes if that were the desire. We see here from the title that the focus of this study is to determine the effects of this essential oil combination against pathogenic bacteria that is commonly found in the respiratory tract of cows. Now, since this study is not a resilience study, we do not expect there to be any resilience terms in the report. But with respect to question number 2, some might characterize this study as having a focus on health maintenance, because we see that the investigators have aimed to evaluate the effectiveness of 4 essential oil components as antibiotics against those pathogenic bacteria. The stressor in this study is the opportunistic bacteria, and the intervention in this study is the essential oil combination. Now, in response to questions number 5 and 6, which ask, are the metrics designed to capture changes that strengthen and empower the system towards resistance, recovery, growth, or adaptive response, and then does the intervention act directly on the system? We see that the study actually focuses on the measurement of bactericidal activity, or minimum inhibitory activity. In other words, the measures clearly focus on the pathogenic bacteria or the stressor. And it doesn't appear as though this study was designed to capture changes that show that the host or the system had been strengthened by the intervention. But what is interesting about this study is that the investigators do acknowledge that the combination of environmental stress factors as well as viral infections altered the animal's defense mechanisms such that it allowed for long. So I point this out because it seems that one way to complement this study with the resilience study design will be to go back and measure whether the intervention was able to help strengthen the defense mechanisms in the cows such that despite exposure to the environmental stressors and viral infections, the cows might be better able to resist lung colonization by the pathogenic bacteria. So the take-home message here is that a study designed to explore resilience outcomes might nicely complement a study like this one. And perhaps understanding both sets of mechanisms, understanding pathogenesis as well as resilience mechanisms, together, that understanding could result in greater long-term improvements in overall health outcomes.
A study, Spirulina oral supplement for enhancing host resilience to virus infection. The clinicaltrials.gov page appears.
Now, I will wrap up my examples with this one last study. This particular study is currently funded by the Office of Dietary Supplements. It is investigating a botanical product to determine whether it can help an individual become more resilient to respiratory viral infections, like the flu. And I point out this study because this study is one done in humans as opposed to the animal studies that I presented prior. But unlike a therapeutic or treatment study in a human, the intervention in this particular study does not seek to directly attack or kill the virus. Instead, the study is designed to investigate whether the intervention can help strengthen the immune system. The study is registered on clinicaltrials.gov, and the status was currently listed as still recruiting. They're looking for adults age 18 and older in the Jackson, Mississippi area.
Harmonizing resilience research. 2 columns titled Opportunities and Gaps.
So going forward, I am optimistic that researchers in the field are getting closer to an agreed upon definition of resilience. And that's not just at NIH, but I think it's across the entire scientific community. And with an agreed upon definition of resilience, there's the opportunity to better characterize resilience outcomes in study designs and research reports. And along those same lines, there's the opportunity for researchers to agree upon a checklist of some sort when designing and reporting on resilience studies to help facilitate the harmonization of the science. But of course, there are still several gaps. For example, characterizing the magnitude of natural stressors. Natural stressors are different from experimental stressors, which can be controlled for. Natural stressors in a real-world environment are very difficult to characterize because in one situation, the stressor might impact system 1, whereas that same stressor might not cause any disruption to system 2. So then how do we characterize the magnitude of that stressor? Similarly, how do we characterize the magnitude or significance of intrinsic protective factors? Again, protective factors that are innate to a natural system. How do we characterize how significant those protective factors are against various stressors? Other gaps that should be explored or require further consideration is the duration, life cycle, or life stages of stressors, interventions, protective factors, and resilience outcomes. In other words, at what point in a system's life cycle or life stage would the intervention be most effective, or would the protective factors be most protective? And at what point in a system's life cycle or life stage do stressors cause the most harm? And then when we're designing a study, what's the duration of the study? At what point do we determine that a resilience outcome has been recorded or observed? And then the measures and metrics. Are they domain specific? And even if they are domain specific, is there a possibility that there are unique measures and metrics for resilience outcomes that are different from those measures and metrics that we use for understanding disease pathways or disease outcomes?
Opportunity for consistent messaging. A cartoon person lifts a weight titled Stress, Disease, Adversity. A red X appears over them. A second person stands surrounded by symbols for DNA, sleep, exercise, friends and family, music, fruits, and medicine. Stress, disease, and adversity attack them from the side.
And finally, I'd like to highlight that the goal of the Trans-NIH Resilience Working Group is not to develop frameworks or definitions about who or which system or which community is resilient or not resilient. The goal instead is to characterize or design frameworks that better characterize study designs to understand which processes, mechanisms, factors are important for building resilience capacity. Now, given that dietary supplements are not intended to treat, diagnose, mitigate, prevent, or cure disease, a resilience research framework might be especially relevant for exploring the potential benefits of dietary supplement use.
Opportunity for consistent messaging. The graphic of the funnel reappears.
In other words, it is important that we continue to identify strategies for reducing burden, reducing stressors, and reducing adversity. And it's important that we continue to identify therapeutics that might one day help to eradicate all disease and infection. But while we're doing those things, we must not forget the importance of understanding how best to strengthen the system itself. Because even given our best efforts, that system will be exposed to and disrupted by a stressor or challenge at some point. And the goal is to help that system to respond to that disruption by way of a full recovery or even growth.
Resources: ODS Resilience and Health Studies Program, Trans-NIH Resilience Working Group.
So I'll close here, but if you're interested in learning more about this work, then I invite you to check out the Office of Dietary Supplements, as well as the Trans-NIH Resilience Working Group webpage. And maybe even consider joining our listserv, which can be accessed via the Resilience Research Scientific Interest Group webpage.
A photo of some participants of TH 2020 NIH Resilience Research Forum. For more information, contact LaVerne L. Brown, PhD, NIH Office of Dietary Supplements. Email trans-resilience-program@od.nih.gov. ods.od.nih.gov/research/resilience.aspx.
Thank you for your time and your interest. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Rebecca Costello.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. That was quite a presentation on a new topic area that I'm sure is new to many folks here. I have a question here. If you could expound a little bit more on how might dietary supplement research benefit from a resilience research framework? So specifically for supplements.
LaVerne Brown.
Right, sure. Thank you, Dr. Costello. So what I tend to see with dietary supplements research is that there is often a proposal for investigating those dietary supplements with respect to a disease pathway. So what does that mean? We usually approach dietary supplement research with this impression that if we're blocking the disease pathway or somehow preventing that disease pathway from, taking effect on the host or the system, then maybe we can call that a resilience outcome. Except with our resilience framework, we don't believe that resilience is necessarily just the opposite of a disease pathway. We believe that there's the possibility that protective pathways and resilience pathways are very different than those disease pathways. And so imagine now that if we investigate those dietary supplements, if our research on those dietary supplements are looking at the protective pathways and the resilience pathways, there could be very different outcomes than what we see if we continue to solely focus on the disease pathway. And I'll give you one example. I presented to you all during the presentation one of the studies that the Office of Dietary Supplements has funded. And it was a study looking at how well a botanical supplement might do with respect to immune health, right? And so if that group focused solely on whether or not that supplement could kill the virus and stop there, then they may have missed an opportunity, right? Because in fact, that supplement was not designed to kill the virus at all. The supplement was not designed to focus solely on the disease pathway. Instead, I like to call it a more of a non-specific focus, right? When we consider the protective pathways or the resilience outcomes, we're strengthening the system in a non-specific fashion. That means that if you're strengthening the immune system, for instance, you're allowing the opportunity that maybe it doesn't matter which virus or which bacteria comes along. If you have appropriately strengthened the immune system, that the immune system might be better prepared to handle that attack. And so I think that's an important nuance for the dietary supplement industry, especially for researchers interested in better understanding the potential benefits of dietary supplement use.
Rebecca Costello.
Good, thank you. That sort of dovetails with an earlier question, and I think you answered it in part. You mentioned that inflammatory signaling was a frequent indicator for resilience in several of our studies. However, if a supplement positively alters inflammation, that could be considered a drug claim. But I think you had the explanation for that.
LaVerne Brown.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Dr. Costello, and thank you for that question. That's right. So I think if we consider the fact that dietary supplements can have non-specific actions on a host or on a system, then perhaps we're getting away a little bit from the drug claim. I can say that the researchers that were working on that particular project were able to satisfy any issues with respect to drug claims on their study. So I think that opens up a nice opportunity for dietary supplements research, because, you know, we've already kind of considered the fact that dietary supplements might have more than one health benefit or more than one outcome, except we have been focusing very often on the research studies on a single disease pathway. Or even if we're considering multiple pathways, they're usually disease pathways. So I think with our resilience framework, we're opening up the possibility that there are other pathways that are protective pathways that might lead to resilience outcomes that need further exploration.
Rebecca Costello.
Good. Thank you. I thank you. And here's someone in the audience who's sort of been reading our minds. Are there any validated biomarkers that have been shown to contribute to any resilience frameworks? Next steps.
LaVerne Brown.
Yes, that's our next steps. And that's exactly what we're hoping to explore next with our collaborators at CHAMP, the Consortium for Health and Military Performance. We have already, as you've seen Andrea and Jonathan mention, we've already been collaborating with that group on understanding immune health, right? So now we do want to take it to the next step. We want to say, what are those real measures or markers for resilience? Because just as I mentioned that I believe that there are different pathways for protection that are not necessarily opposite the disease pathway, I also believe that there might be unique markers for resilience. And so the first thing we want to do is comb the literature and see what's out there. I mean, you know, I could kind of mention what I've seen so far, but I'd rather wait until we've had the opportunity to really dive into the literature and see what's out there and really understand whether or not scientists are allowing for the possibility that there might be new and different indicators for resilience.
Rebecca Costello.
Good, good. So we're looking forward to working on that together. Another question is, how might individuals learn more about the science of resilience? Thinking of the exercise that we've just been through in the last year and the publication in Stress and Health.
LaVerne Brown.
All right, thank you, Dr. Costello. So Dr. Costello and Andrea and Jonathan mentioned the exercise we went through this past year, where we have a podcast in collaboration with the folks at CHAMPS and OPS, where we talk about resilience outcomes with respect to immune health. And then we also talk about the complementary areas for resilience outcomes and whole person health. And that was done in collaboration with the folks at National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. But then I'm also asking for participants to keep your eyes open for an upcoming special issue, a special supplement on resilience research at NIH. There are 2 articles that have been published already, the introductory as well as the summary for that special issue, and then a few other articles. The special issue is expected to have about 10 articles in total, highlighting some of the resilience research that's been done already at NIH and the approach that we're using for combing through that literature. And several of those are already available online, but just stay tuned for the whole issue to become available and hopefully serve as a great resource for investigators going forward.
Rebecca Costello.
Great. That's wonderful. Well, I think we've exhausted our questions here. And I think folks listening have a better idea of resilience in the framework of nutrition and dietary supplements. And it's a very nuanced area. And I know you've been working with it for several years, and we've gone back and forth on a lot of different aspects of resilience and nailing down that definition, which the institutes and centers aligned with. So congratulations on all your work. And
Thank you, Dr. Costello.
And I think we'll close the session today with that, and just give a reminder that to use the web link, the standard full session web link that you received in your email earlier when you sign on tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock for session 3. So thank everyone for their attendance.
Thank you.
And we'll see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Thank you, everyone.